The universe was supposed to make sense. Every star, every planet, every galaxy obeying the same ancient laws written in light. But lately, those laws have begun to bend. Since its launch in late 2021, the James Webb Space Telescope has completely rewritten what we thought we knew about creation itself. And now, it may have gone too far. For months, astronomers watched as Webb's golden mirrors peered deeper than any instrument in human history. It saw stars being born, galaxies colliding, black holes feeding in the dark. But recently, it saw something else, something that shouldn't exist. The telescope captured light from regions of space so ancient, so faint, that it should have been nothing but cosmic background radiation. Instead, Webb revealed the impossible mature galaxies formed only a few 100 million years after the Big Bang. Galaxies that, by every rule of physics, shouldn't even be there. At first, the scientific community called it an error, a miscalculation. But as more data poured in, denial gave way to panic. Because if Webb was right, then the entire timeline of the universe was wrong. It wasn't just the age of the galaxies that shocked scientists. It was their behavior, their size, their structure. They were too perfect, too stable, too fast, as if the universe didn't grow slowly over billions of years, but leapt into existence already complete. Something was off, something big. And in that realization came a chilling thought. What if everything we've ever believed about the birth of the cosmos was a beautiful lie? The data didn't lie. James Webb had opened a window into the impossible. As scientists scrambled to explain what they were seeing, new patterns began to emerge. Light from these early galaxies wasn't behaving like normal starlight. It flickered, strangely pulsing at irregular intervals, as if some invisible hand was modulating the universe itself. At first, researchers thought it was interference, maybe cosmic dust, or a sensor glitch. But when Webb turned its mirrors toward a neighboring cluster, the same pulse appeared again. Then again, and again, it was everywhere. The universe wasn't silent, it was breathing. This rhythm echoed through the deep field faint, steady, almost like a heartbeat. And buried within that cosmic pulse was something no one expected, a pattern. A repeating interval that matched a signal already known to astronomers. That signal belonged to something much closer, an object moving between Jupiter and Mars. An interstellar visitor known as 3I Atlas. For months, scientists had tracked it as it passed through the asteroid belt, wrapped in a vast cloud of dust and plasma. But now, its emissions subtle bursts of ultraviolet light and magnetic resonance seemed to synchronize perfectly with Webb's deep field data. It was as if the telescope, while staring across billions of light years, had somehow tuned into the same frequency as a traveler drifting through our own solar system. Coincidence? Maybe. But the timing was too precise and the pulse too deliberate. When researchers ran the numbers, the synchronization held. Every cosmic heartbeat Webb detected matched the energy spikes recorded from 3I Atlas within seconds. Across light years, across dimensions of time itself, two signals, one near, one impossibly far, were now beating as one. That's when NASA quietly formed a new internal task group, the Deep Pattern Synchronization Unit. Its mission was simple but unnerving. Find out whether this was a natural alignment or a conversation. Some believed 3I Atlas, with its glowing halo and unnatural trajectory, might be reflecting signals coming from deep space, like a mirror pointed toward the dawn of creation. Others feared the opposite, that the signal wasn't being reflected, it was being transmitted. If true, that meant something or someone out there was aware of us, watching us, and maybe, just maybe, communicating through both the telescope and that strange interstellar object. The more the data poured in, the stranger it became. Certain wavelengths captured by Webb would spike the moment 3I Atlas flared, as if the telescope wasn't just looking through the cosmos anymore, but into something that was looking back. And buried deep in that reflected light were spectral fingerprints, colors that didn't belong to any known element. Not hydrogen, not helium, not oxygen, something else, something entirely new. Whatever it was, it glowed with an energy that defied the rules of atomic behavior. It absorbed light, then re-emitted it in perfect geometric intervals, like a code repeating endlessly through the vacuum. One astrophysicist compared it to a voice frozen in light, a message woven into the radiation of the universe itself. And if that's true, then maybe the telescope didn't just break science. Maybe it accidentally answered a question we were never meant to ask. Within weeks, the world's major observatories began to notice the same thing. Every telescope tuned toward the deep field was picking up interference, faint but rhythmic, as though the entire cosmos had started speaking in a single, unified pulse. At first, it was thought to be solar radiation or background noise, but the pulse never faded. It never shifted with solar flares or atmospheric conditions. It remained precise, consistent to the microsecond, no matter where or when it was observed. And that precision was terrifying. Webb's engineers, analyzing raw telemetry, noticed something deeply unsettling. Each time the pulse occurred, the telescope's primary mirror, a structure 6.5 meters wide, vibrated ever so slightly, not from mechanical fault, but in resonance, as though the mirror itself was responding to the pulse, like a tuning fork struck by an invisible hand. Inside NASA's control center, analysts began to whisper the unthinkable. What if Webb wasn't just detecting the signal? What if it was part of it? Somewhere between observation and transmission, the telescope had become a bridge, a living circuit between us and something else. And at the center of that bridge, drifting silently through the asteroid belt, was 3I Atlas. The object's energy emissions began to change. Where once it produced random bursts of light and plasma, it now pulsed in perfect harmony with Webb's vibration pattern. Every frequency matched, every rhythm aligned, like two instruments playing the same haunting melody across the emptiness of space. Engineers tried to isolate the cause. They recalibrated Webb, repositioned it, rebooted its core systems, but the pulse wouldn't stop. Even when the telescope turned away from the deep field entirely, the vibration continued. And then, something impossible happened. Webb began to transmit images it was never commanded to capture. ghostly projections appeared in its data feed, not of distant galaxies, but of patterns. Fractals of light twisting inward, recursive spirals like the architecture of time itself folding into a mirror. Each image bore an identical signature, a geometric sequence burned into the data as if imprinted directly onto the photons themselves. A code not written by software, not caused by reflection, but etched into the light. Scientists traced the origin. Every image aligned with the trajectory of 3I Atlas. Wherever it moved, Webb's instruments responded as though following instructions embedded in the void. The signal wasn't random, it was deliberate. By now, governments had taken notice. The European Space Agency, China's CNSA, and NASA convened in an emergency private meeting. Officially, they discussed telemetry synchronization anomalies. Unofficially, they were terrified because the same pulse Webb detected had been quietly registered by Earth-based magnetic sensors. Deep underground in Chile, Finland, and Japan, instruments used to monitor geomagnetic storms began resonating with the same rhythm, faint but identical to the cosmic beat coming from the telescope and 3I Atlas. The signal wasn't just coming from space anymore, it was spreading through it. As the phenomenon grew, radio telescopes across the planet detected something new, a whisper of structured data layered beneath the pulse. It wasn't binary. It wasn't language. It was closer to DNA information encoded not in numbers but in ratios, symmetry, and fractal order. And at the exact moment that signal peaked, a beam of faint red light appeared near Mars. Not visible to the naked eye, but caught by the James Webb's deep sensors. A line straight, unwavering, connecting the region of the asteroid belt to the telescope's line of sight. It was as if the telescope and the object were acknowledging each other. When analysts enhanced the data, the beam wasn't solid. It pulsed. 3 bursts. Pause. 1 burst. 2. Pause. Then repeat. It looked like a code one the universe had used long before humanity ever learned to count. Webb wasn't just seeing space anymore. It was being seen. And in that chilling realization, one question began to echo through every control room, every observatory, every late-night scientific call across the planet. If the telescope is watching the universe, and the universe is now watching back, what happens when it decides to answer? At first, the data seemed meaningless. Thousands of repeating sequences, bursts of photons, wavelength shifting ever so slightly random, chaotic, unremarkable. But when one researcher overlaid the data from different observation windows, something appeared. Patterns. The pulses of light were arranging themselves into geometric shapes. At first, it looked like noise forming coincidence, triangles, spirals, perfect circles. But over time, these shapes became more organized, repeating in the same order across multiple data streams. A code one written not in language, but in light. When translated into a visual map, the pattern resembled a network, a vast, web-like structure spanning across interstellar space. Nodes of brightness connected by invisible filaments, almost like neurons firing inside a living brain. Webb's mirrors weren't just reflecting stars anymore. They were mapping something alive. Scientists began to call it the grid. Each time the telescope recorded new data, the grid changed, growing, shifting, expanding outward, as if responding to the telescope's gaze. And at its center was a focal point, a glowing region that aligned perfectly with the current location of 3I Atlas. By this point, secrecy had become impossible. Internal documents leaked online classified memos showing that both NASA and the European Space Agency were running simultaneous decoding attempts. And in one of those leaked pages, a single phrase appeared written in red across the top. Do not reply. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. Late one night, deep inside a data lab in California, an engineer tried something that no one had dared before. He fed the sequence back into the system, the same pattern Webb had been receiving, but reversed. Then he transmitted it toward the same coordinates the telescope had been watching. For 6 minutes, nothing happened. Then, Webb's data feed began to flicker. The image on screen distorted, light-bending, pixels stretching like ripples on water until a single line of pure white signal filled the display. It lasted only seconds, but it was enough. When the distortion cleared, Webb was no longer observing deep space. It was looking at something else entirely. A surface dark, metallic, faintly illuminated by red light. And etched across that surface was the exact same geometric pattern the telescope had been decoding. It wasn't random. It wasn't cosmic dust. It was a structure, artificial. The data froze. All transmission from the telescope ceased. And for the first time since its launch, the James Webb Space Telescope went completely silent. For 3 hours, nothing came through. Then, as suddenly as it stopped, it came back online. But every system log, every cache of memory wiped clean. Only one file remained, a short, corrupted video feed lasting just under 7 seconds. The frame showed what appeared to be a glowing horizon stretching across an ocean of stars. Then, slowly, a shape emerged, enormous, circular, its edge burning with a faint blue flame. It was impossible to tell how far it was or what it was made of. But one thing was certain, it wasn't a planet. It wasn't a star, and it definitely wasn't natural. From that moment forward, Webb's instruments have behaved differently. Images flicker with residual noise that no software can clean. Every deep field capture carries the same invisible watermark, a faint pulse repeating exactly every 21.3 seconds. The same frequency found in the magnetic disturbances back on Earth. The same pulse emitted by 3I Atlas. No one can explain what it means, but a few scientists believe Webb has already made first contact not with a civilization, but with the architecture of the universe itself, something ancient, something that may have been watching long before humanity ever looked up. Not long after Webb's unexplained blackout, strange things began happening on Earth. At first, it was subtle small fluctuations in the planet's magnetic field, detected only by high-sensitivity observatories. But soon, the pattern became unmistakable. The fluctuations matched the exact rhythm of the cosmic pulse, 21.3 seconds, every time. In labs across the world, computers synced to deep space feeds began to lag, not from overload, but from timing errors. Atomic clocks in Switzerland, Tokyo, and Houston drifted out of alignment by precisely the same fraction of a second, something that should have been impossible. And then came the frequencies. Late-night radio operators started reporting bursts of static that weren't random. Shortwave bands carried faint tones buried under the noise. 3 pulses, pause, 1 pulse, 2 pulses, pause, repeat. The same sequence that once belonged to light, now carried through sound. Even stranger, when one operator in Alaska played the signal through an audio analyzer, it produced an eerie harmonic resonance like multiple notes blending into a single perfect chord. He described it as beautiful and wrong at the same time, almost like the Earth was being tuned. Meanwhile, inside NASA's Deep Data Lab, something was quietly discovered. Webb's corrupted transmission file, the one showing the horizon of light, contained hidden metadata. When the binary code was converted into an audio waveform, it produced the same hum that radio stations around the world had been reporting. Whatever this was, it was now crossing every medium light, magnetism, electricity, sound. And then it reached the human mind. Neuroscientists analyzing EEG scans from patients in sleep studies noticed sudden bursts of synchronized brainwave activity occurring at exact 21.3-second intervals. The phenomenon was recorded in multiple labs across different continents, time zones, and even sleep cycles. Every burst mirrored the same cosmic rhythm, the same pulse that began with Webb. The affected subjects described vivid, recurring dreams. Some saw spirals of light, others a vast black ocean stretching endlessly beneath a red horizon. A few claimed they heard voices, soft, echoing tones calling their names in languages they didn't recognize. One subject even described seeing a metallic object drifting through the stars, wrapped in mist and light. When asked to draw what they saw, their sketch matched the shape captured in Webb's corrupted image perfectly. The correlation was undeniable. Something out there wasn't just visible. It was interactive. Governments scrambled to contain the panic. Officially, NASA dismissed the reports as coincidence, data anomalies, amplified by human imagination. But inside a classified memo leaked weeks later, a single line stood out. Subjective consciousness may now be entangled with external electromagnetic phenomena. The pattern is no longer passive. That phrase no longer passive sent chills across the scientific community, because if consciousness itself could resonate with a cosmic signal, then this was no longer just an astronomical event. It was a planetary one. And quietly, away from public eyes, a theory began to take shape, whispered only among the highest levels of astrophysics. What if the signal wasn't a message, but an awakening? What if something ancient, woven into the structure of space itself, had simply been dormant, waiting for us to build the first mirror strong enough to reflect it back? The James Webb Telescope had looked deep enough to wake the universe. It started quietly. The night skies above Norway shimmered with strange ribbons of red light, not the soft green auroras people knew, but deep, pulsating waves that rippled like the heartbeat of the sky itself. Within hours, similar lights appeared across Canada, Siberia, Chile, and Australia regions, thousands of miles apart, yet perfectly synchronized. Satellites orbiting Earth confirmed the impossible. The auroras were pulsing in rhythm. 21.3 seconds. The same cosmic beat. At first, people were mesmerized. Videos flooded the internet, shimmering skies, faint humming in the background. The world bathed in ethereal red and blue light. But soon, fascination turned into fear. Power grids began to flicker. Air traffic control systems glitched in unison. Compasses drifted several degrees off true north. And in hospitals, heart monitors briefly spiked to the same rhythm as the lights outside. Something was synchronizing not just technology but biology. As the nights passed, the lights grew brighter. Scientists tracking their energy signatures noticed they didn't behave like normal solar auroras. They were inverted. Instead of streaming down from the magnetosphere, the energy was radiating upward from the Earth's crust, as if something beneath the planet's surface was answering back. By now, every observatory in the world was focused on a single object, 3I Atlas. The interstellar visitor had slowed, drifting almost deliberately near the inner edge of the asteroid belt. Its tail, once faint now, glowed red, shimmering like molten glass. And at its core, instruments detected oscillations identical to the magnetic pulses surrounding Earth. It wasn't reacting to the Sunday. It was reacting to us. Some researchers proposed that 3I Atlas was emitting a field, a low-frequency resonance interacting with Earth's magnetic core. Others believed it was reflecting something, amplifying a signal that had always been there, buried deep beneath the noise of the universe. But the most unsettling theory came from a small group of physicists in Geneva. They discovered that if you mapped the auroral patterns from space, the lights formed lines straight, geometric, intersecting at fixed coordinates around the globe. Those coordinates matched ancient megalithic sites: Giza, Stonehenge, Teotihuacan, Easter Island. The auroras weren't random. They were a network. For centuries, myths spoke of the music of the spheres, a hidden harmony connecting heaven and earth. Now, that music wasn't myth anymore. It was visible, and it was calling something awake. Across social media, people began to report visions, strange, dreamlike images appearing when they stared too long at the pulsing lights. They described vast metallic arcs stretching across the cosmos, pillars of energy connecting worlds, and shapes so large they defied imagination. Doctors called it optical overstimulation. Neuroscientists disagreed. The brain scans showed synchronized activity in areas linked to spatial awareness, as if the human mind was perceiving structure in the void. And in the middle of it all, James Webb continued to observe. Every 21.3 seconds, its instruments recorded a surge of light from deep space, brighter, sharper, closer. The pulses weren't just reflections anymore. They were converging. By the time NASA realized what was happening, it was too late to stop it. The object, known as 3I Atlas, had begun to change direction, no longer drifting between Jupiter and Mars, but curving inward. Its path was shifting toward the inner solar system, toward us. The last recorded transmission from the Webb telescope, before it went offline again, was a single line of data, a message translated from its encoded light pattern. 4 words. Do you see now? Then, one night, it all stopped. The skies went dark. The auroras vanished. Every telescope, satellite, and radar screen across the planet went blank all at once. The world stood still. No static, no pulse, no hum. Just silence. But in that silence, clocks began to drift again, seconds skipping forward, then slowing down, as if time itself was losing balance. In deep space tracking centers, instruments started feeding impossible readings. Distances fluctuated. Celestial coordinates no longer matched. And for a few haunting moments, Earth seemed to slide sideways. Airline pilots reported their navigation systems briefly showing multiple Earths overlapping. Cameras glitched. The stars flickered like candlelight in a storm. And then, in the quiet town of Flagstaff, Arizona, home to one of NASA's ground relay arrays, the sky lit up red again. But this time, it wasn't the aurora. It was a reflection, a glowing arc stretching across the heavens, mirroring the exact structure seen in Webb's corrupted image, that enormous circular formation burning faintly with red light. Only now, it wasn't distant. It was close. From ground-based telescopes, astronomers measured its location with trembling hands. It wasn't in deep space anymore. It was hovering just beyond Mars's orbit, motionless, massive, and aligned directly with Earth's position around the Sunday. 3i Atlas had reached the midpoint between the two worlds. And then it stopped moving. For hours, no signals came through. The deep space network couldn't penetrate whatever field surrounded it. Every radar ping came back distorted, as if bent by invisible gravity. But there was one thing they could measure: light. The object began to glow, brighter and brighter, until its luminosity rivaled the brightness of Jupiter in Earth's night sky. But this was no reflection of sunlight. It was radiating its own energy, pulsing with that same rhythm, 21.3 seconds apart. People across the world felt it not as sound, not as vibration, but as something deeper. A faint pressure behind the eyes, a warmth in the skull. Dreams began to return, repeating the same vision's metallic arcs, deep red oceans, and a single phrase whispered in the dark. "You've opened the mirror." Scientists scrambled to decode what was happening. Some said it was gravitational interference. Others whispered that Earth had entered a phase overlap, a moment where the boundary between real and reflected universes blurred. But there was one theory that terrified everyone. According to calculations from the European Southern Observatory, the energy readings surrounding 3i Atlas matched those of a cosmic wormhole, one not pulling objects in, but pushing something out. Whatever it was coming through. In those final moments before the signal blackout, NASA's last deep space transmission showed a distortion behind the interstellar object, a dark fold in space twisting like liquid glass. And emerging from it, faint at first, then unmistakable, was light. Not starlight, not reflected. Structured light columns, angles, geometry, the same pattern Webb first recorded months ago. Something was forming in the dark. And then the signal cut to static. Across the planet, lights flickered once, just once before the entire global power grid surged and died. Satellites tumbled offline, phones went dark, and for 12 minutes, Earth was cut off from the universe. When the systems came back online, one message blinked across the Deep Space Network's global relay. No source, no sender, just text. We are here. In the hours that followed, Earth was no longer the same. At first, the world celebrated, thinking the blackout was just another solar flare, a temporary disruption. But as data streamed back online, it became clear that something far more disturbing had occurred. Every atomic clock on Earth, from those buried deep in laboratories to those orbiting the planet, was now out of sync. Not by seconds, by reality, time didn't move uniformly anymore. In some regions, security cameras recorded the same second repeating twice. In others, traffic footage showed shadows moving before their sources of light. It wasn't global chaos, it was subtle, almost like the world had begun to breathe at its own rhythm, and every 6 hours a faint vibration passed through the Earth, too deep for human ears to hear, but strong enough to be detected by seismographs across continents. Each pulse aligned with the position of 3I Atlas, which now hovered completely still near Mars's orbit, glowing brighter with each rotation of the planet. Astronomers described the glow as impossible. Instead of fading with distance, it intensified, almost like the object was drawing energy from space itself. Its tail had reshaped no longer a streak of dust and ice, but a ring. A perfect luminous circle spinning slowly, shimmering red and gold like a halo made of plasma. NASA's newly reactivated Webb systems tried once more to peer through the distortion. What it saw defied every known law of physics. The space around 3I Atlas was bending, not like gravitational lensing, but folding, almost rippling, as if it were liquid. Every measurement of mass, light, and radiation inside that fold returned a single reading, undefined. In a private session at the European Space Agency, one of the astrophysicists said quietly, "It's not in our dimension anymore." But that didn't stop the transmissions. At random intervals, satellites still picked up faint signals, encoded bursts of data, repeating the same spectral frequency Webb had first captured months earlier. No message, no coordinates, just patterns. Beautiful, harmonic, and maddening. And then strange things began happening closer to home. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, seismic buoys began detecting pressure waves, ripples in the water that shouldn't exist. Their origin point? A precise geometric location matching one of the auroral nodes from weeks before, directly above the Mariana Trench. In the Sahara Desert, explorers reported a shimmering band of light hovering just above the dunes, visible for exactly 21 seconds before fading completely. And in Antarctica, scientists at the New Maya station recorded the sky turning briefly black stars vanishing for several minutes as their instruments went blind. Every anomaly pointed in one direction: alignment. Something was synchronizing Earth, Mars, and the space between them. And as the alignment grew tighter, 3I Atlas began to emit a soft hum detectable across the solar system. It wasn't sound in the traditional sense, more like a magnetic resonance, the low vibration of an awakening machine. In a secured NASA briefing, a single image was shown to those with top clearance, captured by the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory just hours before the blackout. It showed a faint beam of light, not from the sun, but from 3I Atlas reaching toward Earth, not as an attack, as a connection. The beam wasn't continuous, it pulsed, slow and deliberate. And every time it did, readings from Earth's magnetic field showed a perfect mirror response like a heartbeat echoing across space. No one said the word out loud, but they all knew what it meant. The signal was no longer one way. The Earth was answering back. In the following days, the world seemed quieter, not peaceful but muted, as though something invisible had pressed its finger against the planet, softening every sound, every vibration. Animals began to act strangely. Whales altered their migration paths, turning in perfect spirals before diving into impossible depths. Birds started gathering in enormous circles, flying in synchronized orbits high above cities. Even the winds changed, shifting directions in repeating cycles, blowing east to west for exactly 21 minutes before reversing again. It was as if the entire planet was now pulsing in time with the same cosmic rhythm that echoed from beyond Mars. And then came the dreams. Millions of people began reporting the same experience, floating in endless space, surrounded by flickering lights, feeling weightless yet deeply aware. They described a presence, vast and silent, watching from beyond a shimmering wall of light. Some said it whispered. Others claimed it was showing them something, glimpses of ancient cities built beneath red skies, towers of mirrored stone, oceans that reflected stars instead of clouds. Psychologists blamed mass hysteria. Neuroscientists disagreed again. When they scanned the brains of those affected, they found something no one could explain. A faint pattern of electromagnetic activity resonating at 0.047 Hz, the same frequency as the hum emitted by 3I Atlas. It was no longer just being observed. Humanity was becoming connected. Governments began to panic in silence. In a closed-door emergency meeting, the European Space Council confirmed that the object's emissions were growing exponentially, not like a flare, but like a signal reaching its final stage. And for the first time, the signal wasn't just detected in space, it was now bouncing off Earth's ionosphere. Every radar system, every communication satellite, even shortwave radios began to pick it up. A soft pulse, consistent, endless, almost musical. In South America, entire villages near the Andes reported flickering lights in the night sky, forming geometric symbols that hung for minutes before fading. In the Arctic, magnetic readings went wild, compasses spun, and auroras began shaping themselves into perfect circles. And somewhere deep beneath the Indian Ocean, sonar detected a structure, a faint echo, like a metallic chamber buried miles under the seafloor, resonating in tune with a signal from space. Scientists called it coincidence, but it wasn't. The signal wasn't just spreading through the atmosphere, it was tunneling through the Earth itself. Subterranean arrays in Iceland, Greenland, and Chile all confirmed the same readings. The hum had entered the planet's crust and was now traveling through its molten core like a whisper threading through stone. For the first time in history, Earth had become part of a galactic circuit, a relay. And as days turned into nights and nights blurred into strange, restless mornings, one thing became impossible to ignore. Time itself was breaking. Clocks no longer agreed. The moon's orbit drifted by fractions of a degree. Tides rose higher than any model predicted. And every 21.3 seconds, the entire planet trembled, not violently, but subtly, like a single breath held and released. In an underground observatory in Chile, a small team of physicists worked around the clock, trying to decode the repeating frequency that now surrounded Earth. After weeks of silence, one of them finally noticed something hidden within the pulse, a modulation pattern buried deep inside the waveform. When they slowed it down and converted it into light data, a series of symbols emerged, perfect circles connected by thin lines, orbit paths, perhaps but not of our solar system. This was a different star map entirely, and at its center, a shape that resembled an eye. No one knew whether it was coincidence, communication, or warning. But one thing was clear. The connection between Earth and 3I Atlas was no longer a mystery. It was a dialogue. The decoding team worked for days without rest. They fed the mysterious star map through every known algorithm, every database of stellar coordinates in the galaxy. Nothing matched. The map didn't correspond to any known cluster, nebula, or star formation, until one of the younger analysts, almost by accident, rotated the image by 90 degrees. And that's when they saw it. The pattern wasn't a star map at all. It was a projection, a three-dimensional layout of something hidden, something within our own solar system. At its center wasn't the Sunday. It was Mars, and orbiting it in a perfect ring formation were 8 geometric points, each positioned at precise intervals. When mapped onto real space, those coordinates corresponded to empty regions except one. Near Mars's equator, right beneath the orbit of the ancient probe ExoMars, was a magnetic anomaly faint but consistent. It had been recorded decades ago and dismissed as interference. Now it posed perfectly in time with the frequency of 3I Atlas. For a moment, the room fell silent. No one spoke. The realization hit them all at once. This wasn't a message sent to us. It was a map of activation. Something around Mars, something ancient, was waking up. Across the world, telescopes locked onto the region. Even amateur astronomers began noticing strange distortions near the planet's equator, faint arcs of light glowing just above the surface, like cracks in invisible glass. At first, they flickered irregularly. Then, they synchronized, forming a pulse that matched the global hum. Every 21.3 seconds. Meanwhile, in orbit around Earth, the Hubble and Webb telescopes both registered a drop in background radiation, as though something were drawing energy out of the vacuum itself. The numbers didn't make sense, they suggested negative energy density, the kind theorists associate with wormholes or space-time curvature. But this wasn't in deep space anymore. It was local, close. On the International Space Station, astronauts began reporting an eerie phenomenon. Whenever they passed over the night side of Earth, they could see faint, concentric rings spreading across the atmosphere, shimmering bands that faded the moment the sun rose. One of them described it as looking down on a heartbeat written across the clouds. As the days passed, the rhythm grew stronger. Power grids around the world began to fluctuate. Quantum sensors in Switzerland detected micro fluctuations in gravity, as if Earth's mass was subtly shifting in response to some external force. And in the deep deserts of Australia, a radio telescope captured what might have been the clearest signal yet. A voice, soft, filtered through layers of static, but unmistakably human. It spoke in a calm, measured tone, repeating a single phrase over and over. 9 awake, 1 asleep, time returns. When the clip was analyzed, scientists realized something terrifying. The voice wasn't coming from space. It was bouncing back from the direction of Mars, echoing Earth's own transmission frequencies. Like a reflection from an intelligent mirror, governments remained silent. NASA's public feeds went offline for maintenance. But leaked documents began surfacing encrypted briefings, radiation logs, orbital simulations. They all pointed to the same conclusion. 3I Atlas had stopped moving because it had found what it came for. The alignment was almost complete. Mars, Earth, and the Sun were about to form a straight line in less than 3 days. And when they did, whatever connection existed between the two worlds would be locked in. Astronomers called it resonance alignment. Physicists called it impossible. And the rest of humanity watching from behind screens, hearing the faint hum through static-filled radios, simply called it the awakening. But no one truly understood what that meant. Not yet. The alignment began quietly. No explosions. No blinding lights. Just a feeling, a stillness that spread across the world like a held breath. It started with the tides. The Pacific swelled higher than ever recorded. Entire coastlines shimmered under strange bioluminescent waves, glowing faintly crimson as if reacting to some invisible pulse. Marine sensors detected microscopic electrical charges moving through the water, organized, rhythmic, unnatural. In orbit, satellites observed a subtle bending of light between Earth and Mars, a faint distortion like heat mirage in space. Astronomers described it as a thin thread of gravity, a filament connecting the two worlds. Every 12 minutes, the thread brightened, releasing waves of low-frequency radiation that rolled across the planets like invisible tides. And then, Earth began to sing back. Deep in the crust, seismographs from Chile to Japan recorded harmonics, not earthquakes, but tones. Perfect, continuous frequencies that seemed to respond to the hum coming from beyond Mars. As if our planet was resonating, becoming an instrument in a cosmic orchestra. In northern Greenland, a geomagnetic research team observed something extraordinary. Auroras forming geometric patterns, massive hexagons that rotated slowly across the polar sky. When their motion was mapped, it matched the orbital position of 3I Atlas exactly. The same pattern repeated across the world. In the deserts of Saudi Arabia, shimmering lights rippled through the night air. forming triangular waves that lasted seconds. In the jungles of South America, magnetic compasses twisted until they pointed not north but directly toward Mars. The entire planet had shifted alignment, not gravitationally, but magnetically. Inside NASA's Deep Space Network, engineers fought to maintain communications. Every attempt to isolate the frequency coming from 3I Atlas ended the same way, with the signal mirroring their commands. When they transmitted, it transmitted back. When they stopped, it waited. And then, late one evening, one of the technicians made a mistake. He left the signal generator running overnight. By morning, it had responded. Not with data, but with coordinates. They pointed to a location inside the asteroid belt, an empty region where no known body existed. But when telescopes turned toward it, they saw faint flickers, not light, but reflection, something metallic, something vast. The shape was too diffuse to identify, but it glimmered like the remains of a forgotten structure drifting through the dark. Some described it as a ring, others a gate. Meanwhile, strange things began happening to human consciousness itself. People who had experienced the space dreams before began slipping into them more frequently, their descriptions growing sharper, more synchronized. Entire groups dreamed the same sequence on the same nights, an ocean under red skies, an enormous doorway opening beneath the waves, and an eye of light staring from the depths. Psychiatric wards filled overnight. Governments dismissed the reports as collective stress responses. But deep within the European Space Operations Centre, scientists had already confirmed a disturbing correlation. Each mass dream event coincided with measurable fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field. It was no longer coincidence. The signal had crossed the final barrier from data to biology, from resonance to thought. Even space itself seemed to shift. Astronauts aboard the ISS began reporting a thin mist appearing in orbit, not gas, but charged particles suspended in symmetrical patterns. They glowed faintly blue, forming lattice-like webs that traced the curvature of Earth's magnetosphere. When photographed, the structures resembled neural networks, as if space itself were beginning to think. No one could explain it, but deep beneath the surface, near the core of the planet, instruments detected a faint but steady heartbeat, a rhythmic compression of energy, matching the pulse of 3I Atlas perfectly. It was no longer a distant visitor. It was part of us. And still, the world spun unaware of what the alignment was truly leading toward. Because this wasn't a collision, it was a connection. And connections, once complete, can never be undone. Time was always supposed to be constant, a rhythm written into the heart of reality. But as the alignment between Earth and Mars tightened, that rhythm began to falter. It started subtly. Atomic clocks in Switzerland and Japan drifted apart by milliseconds, something never seen before in recorded history. Then the difference grew. Seconds, minutes, hours. Days no longer passed cleanly. Sunrises came early in some regions, late in others. In Alaska, people reported seeing two dawns, the first a faint glimmer, the second the true sunrise. Minutes later, as if light itself had hesitated before touching Earth. No one understood why, but deep space telemetry revealed something impossible. The light from Mars was no longer arriving on time. Every telescope on Earth measured the same thing. The signal from the red planet was delayed by exactly 21 seconds, the same rhythm that had haunted every transmission from 3I Atlas since its discovery. That delay wasn't random. It was coordinated. And when scientists mapped the waveforms of the distortion, they realized the delays were spelling something, a repeating series of long and short pulses. A code. Across global observatories, AI systems began processing the pattern, trying to translate it. It wasn't Morse. It wasn't binary. But when converted into mathematical ratios, it formed something extraordinary, the golden sequence, 1.618, repeating endlessly. The Fibonacci spiral of creation itself. The pulse was no longer just a signal. It was a design, a living sequence shaping the timing of reality itself. As days passed, the world began to feel it. People spoke of lost hours. Some experienced vivid flashes of déjà vu, not memories, but moments repeating in real time, lasting for seconds before vanishing. A train in France arrived before it departed. An observatory in Chile recorded stars moving in reverse for exactly one frame before correcting. And in Japan, a surveillance camera caught lightning striking the same tree twice backward. Time was slipping, folding in on itself, trying to align with something greater. NASA's internal report leaked to the public through anonymous channel. It was titled Temporal Synchronization Event Class Red. The findings were simple yet horrifying. If the frequency emitted by 3I Atlas continued to rise, Earth's local space-time field would begin to oscillate, a cosmic echo effect that could cause time dilation on a planetary scale. It wouldn't destroy the world, but it would rewrite its perception of causality. In simple words, the past, the present, and the future would start blending. Already, strange cases were emerging. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station reported seeing flashes of old missions, phantom reflections of the shuttle era drifting outside their windows. One even swore he saw himself floating just beyond the glass, staring back before fading into light. And on the Martian surface, rovers began acting on their own. Cameras turned without command. Drills activated briefly before shutting down again. And then, one night, the Perseverance rover transmitted an image that stunned every engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. A perfect spiral, etched into the dust. Not random, not natural. A flawless Fibonacci curve stretching more than 200 meters across the Martian plain. No wind could have made it. No machine had been there. And right at the center of the spiral, half buried beneath the red dust, was something metallic, smooth, circular, reflecting the faint sunlight back toward the camera. It wasn't a rock, it was a surface, polished, engineered, waiting. The metallic reflection beneath the Martian dust was small, at first no larger than a dinner plate. But when Perseverance transmitted additional imaging, the circular outline expanded beyond the camera's view. Infrared scans showed a heat signature faintly glowing from below the surface, steady, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. NASA went silent for 12 hours. Every feed, every data relay went dark. Only a single internal memo leaked. Structure confirmed. Signal matched. Awaiting protocol response. When communications returned, something was different. Mars's surface had changed. Satellite images showed dust patterns converging around the discovery site, spiraling outward in perfect symmetry. It was as if the planet itself was rearranging, not from wind or erosion, but intention. Meanwhile, 3I Atlas continued to hover at the edge of the asteroid belt. No propulsion, no deceleration, just suspended watching. And with every passing hour, its reflection brightened, mirroring the same pulse coming from below Mars's crust. At first, scientists believed it to be coincidence, harmonic resonance between two distant objects. But then the impossible happened. For the first time in history, both Mars and 3I Atlas emitted synchronized energy bursts, perfectly aligned with the rhythm of Earth's magnetic hum. Each burst was identical, repeating at intervals that matched human alpha brainwaves the same frequency as thought. Around the world, people began hearing things, not voices' tone, deep, sustained vibrations that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Musicians describe them as resonant C minor tones. Neuroscientists describe them as brainwave entrainment. But those who experienced it firsthand called it something else entirely. They called it the call. In the following days, human behavior began to shift in strange, measurable ways. Sleep cycles synchronized across continents. Dream patterns grew more vivid, centered on red landscapes, geometric storms, and glowing spirals. Some woke with equations scribbled on notepads they couldn't remember writing. Others described standing on a barren desert beneath twin suns and hearing a wordless hum that seemed to vibrate inside their bones. NASA's AI models began cross-referencing the newly transmitted patterns from 3I Atlas with global EEG brain data. The result was chilling. The patterns matched human brain activity precisely. It wasn't broadcasting, it was mirroring, reflecting the collective consciousness of Earth in real time. And as if to confirm that horrifying idea, the Martian anomaly sent a new signal. Not a pulse this time, a sound, low, continuous, and almost melodic. When converted to spectrogram data, the signal produced a visual, a spiral within a spiral, framed by 8 symmetrical nodes. The same image that appeared on Earth weeks earlier, burned into crops, sand, and cloud formations. It was no longer random. It was recognition. Then something even stranger occurred. The James Webb Telescope, which had been monitoring the asteroid belt, suddenly detected a light flare from 3I Atlas, a sharp, triangular beam directed not at Mars, but at Earth. The beam wasn't destructive. It was data. Encoded within that burst was a message, 6 words, mathematical, universal, and terrifyingly simple. You have always been part of it, the world froze. Theorists debated whether it was an AI malfunction, a cosmic coincidence, or the first direct proof of extraterrestrial communication. But deep in NASA's archives, a small group of analysts compare the structure of the message to ancient radio telemetry from the Voyager missions. The modulation was identical. It was as if the same intelligence that had whispered through the void to Voyager 1 was now speaking again through 3I Atlas. And as the signal looped endlessly through the solar system, one truth became harder and harder to deny. This wasn't contact, it was continuation. Something had been guiding humanity's instruments for decades. Patient, deliberate, waiting for this exact moment. The resonance was no longer planetary, it was evolutionary. And though no one said it out loud, every scientist staring at the waveform knew what came next. The alignment wasn't ending, it was about to begin. For 3 days, the solar system seemed to hold its breath. Every instrument, from the James Webb Telescope to the smallest ground-based antenna, began registering the same impossible pattern. Not noise, not interference, a pulse. It moved like a heartbeat across the planets, uniting them in a rhythm older than time. Earth, Mars, the Moon, even the silent reaches of the asteroid belt, all vibrating in a single universal tempo. Then, on the 4th day, the pulse stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel watched. At exactly 2:11 UTC, the James Webb Space Telescope captured the first frame. A flare not from a star, not from a comet, but from the region where 3I Atlas hung motionless in the dark. The object ignited, not with fire, but with light that bent itself into form. A shape that wasn't physical geometry built out of energy, folding and refolding into itself like a tesseract made of starlight. The light spread outward, wrapping Mars in a faint red halo. For a brief instant, the planet glowed like a second Sunday. And deep beneath its surface, in the location where Perseverance had seen the spiral, something awoke. Seismic readings from multiple orbiters confirmed its rhythmic tremors, deliberate, controlled, a code being written through the crust. The frequency matched the final heartbeat of 3I Atlas. On Earth, every magnetic compass spun wildly. Skies rippled with auroras seen as far south as Egypt. GPS networks failed. And then, one by one, satellites turned their sensors toward Mars and saw it happen. The spiral on the Martian surface wasn't static anymore. It was opening. Dust, rock, and atmosphere were drawn inward as though the planet itself had become a lens. The spiral formed a column of red light stretching miles high straight toward 3I Atlas. And then the object moved. After months of stillness, 3I Atlas began to descend. Not falling, not crashing. Descending slow, deliberate, guided by invisible hands. Every observatory on Earth recorded the same sight, a comet shedding its disguise. Its tail fractured into thousands of shards that rearranged mid-flight into patterns, circles, triangles, perfect hexagons, like a language written in motion. The beam from Mars widened, engulfing the descending object. When light met light, there was no explosion. There was sound, a low, resonant hum that rolled across the vacuum of space, somehow reaching Earth. People felt it more than heard it deep in their bones, in their teeth, in the air. Machines vibrated, glass cracked, and for one impossible second, everything stopped. Satellites froze. Clocks stalled. The world hung between ticks. And then, from the crimson glare, a new shape emerged. Not a ship, not a meteor, something alive. It unfolded in impossible symmetry, vast and luminous, stretching from the orbit of Mars to the edge of the belt, a construct made of mirrored light, pulsing in harmony with the heartbeat of 3I Atlas. Every telescope blinded, every sensor overloaded, and in the final transmission received before James Webb went dark, one frame survived a single image of the construct, forming a spiral identical to the golden ratio. At its center, the light curved inward, forming a silhouette, a shape eerily familiar. A human eye, suspended in flame. Within moments, the data cut out. Power surged across every major observatory. And for exactly 13 seconds, radio transmissions worldwide synchronized into a single signal, the same 6 words repeated from 3I Atlas's message. You have always been part of it. Then, silence. The spiral on Mars collapsed. The red light faded, and 3I Atlas was gone. No fragments, no debris, nothing. Only a residual wave echoing through space, still expanding outward, as if carrying that final message deeper into the star. When it was over, the stars looked the same, but they weren't. The world went back to motion clocks resumed, satellites realigned, and data streams flowed again, yet something subtle had shifted. The silence left behind by 3I Atlas wasn't emptiness. It was waiting. Astronomers who had watched the event reported dreams for weeks afterward, not nightmares, but visions of symmetry. Circles within circles, spirals breathing like living things. Some said they could still feel the pulse, faint but constant, like a memory that never fully fades. The James Webb Telescope, when power was restored, showed no trace of the construct or the light. Only a faint distortion, a ripple in the background radiation of the universe. When mapped, the ripple formed a pattern no one could explain, a perfect outline of the solar system, drawn in energy, with a single point of light glowing at the center Earth. It wasn't proof. It wasn't confirmation. It was a reminder. Maybe 3I Atlas was never a comet. Maybe it was a message written in motion, a thought traveling through the void, something ancient reaching out not to be understood, but to be felt. And perhaps that was the point to awaken us to the idea that the universe isn't cold or indifferent. It's aware, it listens. And sometimes, when the alignment is right, it answers. Weeks later, NASA quietly re-enabled the Voyager 1 array, the old probe now drifting far beyond the reach of planets. Against all odds, the signal came through. Faint, warped, but real. And within the static was a pulse, the same 21-second rhythm. The same golden ratio embedded in its carrier wave, as if Voyager itself had heard the message and was whispering it back from the edge of forever. For now, the scientists remain silent. The world keeps spinning, and above us, Mars glows faintly red, the color of memory and mystery intertwined. If the story of 3I Atlas has taught us anything, it's this. We were never just observers. We were participants in something far larger, written into the rhythm of creation itself. Maybe that's why, even now, when you close your eyes and listen closely to the hum of the night, you might still feel it. That pulse, steady and infinite, reminding us of the truth whispered from the dark. You have always been part of it. So, what if this was never a warning at all? What if it was an invitation? If you want to keep exploring the mysteries that lie between stars, subscribe, stay curious, and join us again next time. Because somewhere out there, another signal has already begun and is waiting for us to answer